They're fraud. Now you want to get the report of government from nation government representatives. That's what our titles represent. This is our obligation to you. We're not doing you any favor. We're carrying out our duties. Are we correct? Let me read it from page to page. It's only 4 pages. I'm going to make sure that this left here so you all can get a copy from the records from the Congress, including the Treaty of Verona. We also have this in the Protocols of Liberty book in context so you can understand. However, this is it. Are we clear? You're supposed to know this stuff. But it'll be obvious to you why these so-called leader guys is hiding this information from you too, because you figure out that they've been selling you out without me telling you that anyway. From the beginning, House of Representatives, Florida Congress, with the Speaker pro tempore, the President pro tempore, all your congressmen, all your senators, all your congresswomen, all your senator women, etc., all of the club's members talking about their representatives for the United States of North America when they know that they're actually working for the Popes of Rome under the Treaty of Verona. So let's use their own words and examine what they say, understand why you're in trouble, etc. Also within this is your arguments against the IRS or any other frauds that's been stealing your lunch money and your peanut butter sandwiches, etc. Mr. Speaker, we are here now, Chapter 11 members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future, and there are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March the 9th, 1933, 48 Statute 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent, HJR 192, 73rd Congress, in session June the 5th, 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolve the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacity of all United States governmental officers and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The receivers of the United States bankruptcy are the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. All United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status, which means fraud, in name only, under emergency war powers with the constitutional Republican form of government now dissolved. That's why you hear them keep saying states of instead of New Jersey State Republic, which is the legitimate government. But they know they've miseducated the people, and they already know these phony, fake nation leader guys ain't going to teach you, even though they know this information, helping them trick you so they can rob you by virtue of misclassification of both you and the government. Boy, this stuff is hot.
Yes, it is.
You got that right, and then some more. So the new form of government is known as democracy, being an established socialist communist order under which, under a new form of government or governor for America. And this act, what they did was instituted and established by transferring and or placing the office of the Secretary of the Treasury to that of the Governor of the International Monetary Fund, which will be referred to as the IMF.
And it's also in violation with Article 4, Section 4.
Absolutely. Now, that's public law. You understand our constitutional law, public law, 94-564, page 8, section HR 13955 reads in part, the United States Secretary of Treasury received no compensation for representing the United States, which we mentioned earlier. The reason they don't get compensated because the office doesn't exist. Gold and silver were such a powerful money during the founding of the United States of America that the founding fathers declared that only gold or silver coins can be money in America. Go read Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution and enforce it as Noble Drawley told you to do. Since gold and silver coins were heavy and inconvenient for a lot of transactions, they were stored in banks, and a claim check was issued as a money substitute. So those greenbacks are the checks, not some other paper for you to get the greenbacks. The greenbacks are checks. People traded their coupons as money. Currency, quote unquote. Currency is not money. Are we clear, you all? This is coming from the floor of Congress. Currency is not money, but a money substitute. That's a nice way of saying counterfeit. People traded their coupons as money, currency, and currency is not money, but a money substitute. Redeemable currency must promise to pay a dollar equivalent in gold or silver money. Federal Reserve notes, FRNs, make no such promises and are not money. A Federal Reserve note is a debt obligation of the federal United States government and is not money. The federal United States government and the U.S. Congress were not and never have been authorized by the Constitution for the United States of America to issue currency of any kind, but only lawful money, gold and silver coin. It is essential that we comprehend the distinction between real money and paper money substitute or counterfeit. And one cannot get rich by accumulating money substitutes. One can only get deeper in debt. We the people no longer have any money, and most Americans have never been paid any money for a very long time. Perhaps not in their entire lives. Now do you comprehend why you feel broke? Now do you understand why you are bankrupt along with the rest of the country? Remember, this is the congressman. This is on the floor. The senators in Congress, all these people y'all been voting for.
These are the people, according to the Constitution, that has the vested powers to make law for the country.
And have the obligation to protect you from this very stuff. And yet they have conspired with foreigners to enforce this thing and to enforce slavery without your permission and not telling you what they've done. Federal Reserve notes, FRN, are unsigned. Listen to this carefully. Listen to this carefully. Federal Reserve notes are unsigned checks written on a closed account. Do you have that? Y'all understood what I just told you? Federal Reserve notes are unsigned checks written on a closed account. Federal Reserve notes are an inflatable paper system designed to create debt through inflation, quote unquote, devaluation of currency. And whenever there's an increase of the supply of a money substitute in the economy without a corresponding increase in the gold and silver backing, inflation occurs. Inflation is an invisible form of taxation that irresponsible governments inflict on their citizens. The Federal Reserve Bank, who controls the supply and movement of Federal Reserve notes, has everybody fooled. And they have access to an unlimited supply of FRNs, paying only for the printing cost of what they need. And Federal Reserve notes are nothing more than a promissory note for the U.S. Treasury security T-bills, a promise to pay the debt of the Federal Reserve Bank. Not the country, the bank, private, foreign. There is a fundamental difference between paying and discharging a debt. To pay a debt, you must pay with value or substance, i.e. gold or silver, barter, or commodity. With Federal Reserve notes, you can only discharge a debt. And you cannot pay a debt with a debt currency system. You cannot service a debt with a currency that has no backing in value or substance, and no contract in common law is valid unless it involves an exchange of good and valuable consideration, quote unquote. Unpayable debt transfers power and control to the sovereign power structure that has no interest in money, law, or equity, or justice, because they have so much wealth already by virtue of this fraud that they've created. Are we clear?
Islam.
Their lust is for power and control. And since the inception of central banking, they have controlled the fates of nations. The Federal Reserve System is based, pay attention to this, because they're admitting it right here. The Federal Reserve System is based on the canon law. You know what that means? The canon law is the popes. And the principles of sovereignty protected in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. In fact, the international bankers used a canon law trust, quote unquote, as their model, adding stock and naming it a joint stock trust, quote unquote. The U.S. Congress had passed a law making it illegal for any legal person, quote unquote, to duplicate a joint stock trust, quote unquote, in 1873. And the Federal Reserve Act was legislated post facto. In 1870 to 1870, although post facto laws are strictly forbidden by the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9.3, the Federal Reserve System is a sovereign power structure separate and distinct from the federal United States government. Are we clear?
Islam.
The Federal Reserve is a maritime lender and or maritime insurance underwriter to the federal United States, operating exclusively under Admiralty maritime law. And the lender or underwriter bears the risk, and the maritime law compelling specific performance in paying the interest or premiums are the same. Assets of the debtor can also be hypothecated to pledge something as a surety without taking possession of it, as a surety by the lender or underwriter. And the Federal Reserve Act stipulated that the interest on the debt was to be paid in gold. Get the point? Are they robbing you under fraud? There is no stipulation in the Federal Reserve Act for ever paying the principal. And prior to 1913, keep this in mind, Noble Ali established the Old Canaanite Temple, 1913, right? Keep in mind the political timelines. Prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear, quote-unquote, allodial title. Are you all familiar with that? You better get familiar with it. Prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear, allodial title to property, free and clear of any liens or mortgages, until the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Now you recognize the counter-activity to everything Noble Ali did? Why isn't this being reported to you? Hypothecated all property within the federal United States to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. That's who is operating the taxing power, in which the trustees, stockholders, held legal title. The U.S. citizen, tenant, quote-unquote, franchisee. Tenant means renter, right? Franchisee, which means a corporate grant. You ain't owning nothing. How come they're not teaching you these things? So, the trustee stockholders held legal title. U.S. citizens, tenant, franchisee was registered as a beneficiary of the trust via his or her birth certificate. In 1933, the Federal United States hypothecated all of the present and future properties, assets, and the labor of their quote-unquote subjects, the 14th Amendment citizen, to the Federal Reserve System. Now let's take this and go right to Noble Ali's command in the divine warning that the 14th and 15th Amendment is not necessarily for the salvation of my people and citizens. Pay attention to the correlations. In return, the Federal Reserve System agreed to extend the Federal United States Corporation all the credit money substitutes, quote unquote, it needed. Like any other debtor, the Federal United States government had to assign collateral and security to their creditors as a condition of the loan. And since the Federal United States didn't have any assets, Now you understand? Because they're foreigners. Are we clear? They have no assets. Why? Because all the assets is the Moorish estate. Now you understand why none of them speak under that great seal on that note?
Islam. And let me correlate that so we can register that in our minds. The divine warning states that the gold, the silver, the commerce belongs to the citizens.
And the citizens
and the
alone.
Citizens alone.
Are we clear?
Please make that clear. And this is Congress once again backing up what Noble Drew Ali was saying. They're saying the same thing. Islam.
But what is it? Why isn't this information dispensed to you by your so-called Negro leader guys and all your nation guys talking about nations and these grand sheets, which makes you victim because you don't even know it's being used against you? On top of the fact you think you own property, and they've hypothecated it. Anyway, in return, the Federal Reserve System agreed to extend to the Federal United States Corporation, keep this in mind, corporation, not the land, not the real people, private corporation, all the credit and money substituted needed, and like any other debtor, the Federal United States government had to assign collateral and security to their creditors as a condition of the loan. And since the Federal United States didn't have any assets, they assigned the private property of their economic slaves, quote unquote. Now you understand all them capital letters they keep sending you in your bills? And our people don't read because they don't know the difference between a corporate person and a natural person? The United States citizens as collateral against the unpayable federal debt. Unpayable. They also pledged the unincorporated federal territories, national parks, the forests, birth certificates, and non-profit organizations as collateral against the federal debt. And all has already been transferred as payment to the international bankers. It's already been done. And unwittingly, America has returned to its pre-American Revolution feudal roots, whereby all land is held by a sovereign and the common people had no rights to hold a allodial title to property. And once again, we the people are the tenants and sharecroppers renting our own property from a sovereign in the guise of the Federal Reserve Bank. And we the people have exchanged one master for another. And this has been going on for over 80 years without the informed knowledge of the American people, without a voice protecting or protesting loud enough. And now it is easy to grasp why America is fundamentally bankrupt. Why don't more people own their properties outright? Which is the question. Why are 90% of Americans mortgaged to the hilt and have little or no assets after all debts and liabilities have been paid? And why does it feel like you are working harder and harder and getting less and less? Pardon me. And we are reaping what we have sown, and the result of our harvest is a painful bankruptcy and a foreclosure on American properties, precious liberties, and a way of life. And few of our elected representatives in Washington, D.C. have dared to tell the truth. The federal United States is bankrupt, and our children will inherit this unpayable debt and the tyranny to enforce it and to enforce paying it. America has become completely bankrupt in world leadership, become completely bankrupt in financial credit, and its reputation for courage, vision, and human rights, etc. And this is an undeclared economic war, bankruptcy, and economic slavery of the most corrupt order. Wake up, America, and take back your country. And the colorable actions, color people, color law, see the point? The colorable actions and activities revealed and exposed by the representative James Traficant in his speech before the House of Representatives gives proof to the treasonous acts of sitting politicians, and party affiliations are irrelevant. The common thread that is weaved throughout both the monopolized political parties, the Republican and the Democrat, leave no doubt as to their predetermined, pre-existing, and integrity-compromised agenda. And examples of international and treaty law, acknowledgments, resolutions, and proclamations, and these are some statements we wrote as we put the proclamations, so that the people can have it in context and understand its relationship and why they're trying to look now like they're not maintaining, if you understand, human traffic, because we're proclaiming publicly our nationality, and we sent it out to the other governments of the world, which all these grand chiefs were supposed to have done. So they're admitting to you on the floor of Congress that you're economic slaves. Why is these reports not made to you? When these people are sitting around here talking about nationhood, and you don't even know national and international law, are totally declared incompetent, and they're escheating all your property. And your marriage certificate and your birth certificates are sold as stock on the stock market, and you think they're talking about some houses. And it's the houses of your zodiac law that you don't know about yourself. And you ain't been taught by these fake grand chiefs that criticize us for telling the truth. Because they don't have the courage, or either they didn't sold out to these Romans. And this is the floor of Congress themselves, backing up everything we've been telling you. And how come you haven't